to record automatic.
Oh, right on.
Oh, there it is. Yep. And we can go ahead and trim it kind of after the fact.
Right on. Well, it looks like we're live, correct?
Everybody is slowly joining.
Okay. We're going to give a minute or two so that people can get in to the conference. And I'm going to tell a story while we're waiting. It's about batteries. So the Consumer Product Safety Commission is posting a bunch of recalls for batteries, as we know they would, and it's probably that situation will probably increase. I've been trying to help educate the Consumer Product Safety Commission, as has Call to Recycle, and there's a recall of a high wattage recalled battery, and I said HHW isn't taking these. We're not going to take these. They're super expensive to get rid of. And he said, well, I think some might take them, so I'm going to leave that guidance up there, and I'm not having it. This is a product not from anywhere around us, and it's going to cost people hundreds of dollars to get rid of. So I think we have to work back with them, which is what I'm hoping we can do at NAMA. Oh, I should be sharing my screen. I'm going to do that. And we can get started here. Why is it so hard for me to find the right window, I tell you. Okay. And we're going to have to go back a few slides. All righty. Welcome, everyone, to our third in the series of our battery webinars. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. I'm going to just get right into it here. NAMA is hosting the webinars, and I've been doing a little bit of an intro to NAMA for the first few webinars. So this slide looks like repeat because it is. But we really encourage you to join, and we have a special deal for you. So I just wanted to mention this. We'll offer a discount on membership fees for battery webinar attendees, and you need to hook up with NAMA admin to get that discount. So I encourage you to do that. Again, our conference is coming up. Members receive a deep discount on that. And we'll be doing a call for papers probably about March, and registration opens later, like July. Check back to our website to see what those actual dates end up being, or we'll give you a mailing on that as well. Again, I love this conference. It's small, we're not a huge organization. There's a lot of friendly faces. You might not get a paper accepted by a large organization. There's a better chance with us. So I encourage you all to consider it. The webinars are available on the website, as we've noted. The first two are up. Most of the presentations are up as well. So we encourage you to go back there and check those out. We have today's webinar, and I'll let Amanda Cotton take over here in a minute. Amanda works for the Pollution Control Agency, and she has been here for 15 years, which makes me feel old since I was in on the hiring practice. So I'm glad she's digging into this for us. And with that, I think you can take it away, Amanda.
Yeah, thank you. So today's webinar, Electronics Recyclers and Battery Containing Device Management, which fits with what I do that I've been doing for most of these years. I'm the e-waste coordinator for the Minnesota Electronics Recycling Act, so this fits in perfectly. So I want to just quickly say thanks to Jennifer Volkman, my coworker, and Sarah Murray with Wisconsin e-waste program, and Steve Noble with the Michigan e-waste program for helping me coordinate this. And then thank you to our great speakers that you're about to hear from on this topic. So I'm going to give a quick, just a 1 or 2 sentence bio for each of them, and then we'll get into the presentations. So Emily Ferrant, first speaker, Operation Manager for Green Eye Partners. Emily has supported companies in the certification preparation around the world. And then we'll have Neil Peters Michaud, the CEO of Cascade Asset Management, which is an IT asset disposition company started in 1999 with processing facilities in Wisconsin, Indiana, and Florida. Then Eric Voves, Director of Sales for Dynamic Lifecycle Innovations, which is a global electronics and materials lifecycle management company founded in 2007. And in his role, he provides strategic sales oversight. And then we'll end with Dan Richard with Outreach Community Liaison with the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. So based out of Central Michigan, his main responsibilities are to provide stakeholders with the necessary tools and resources to operate within the federal hazardous material regulation safely and confidently. So a lot of great information today. And with that, we can have Emily share her PowerPoint.
Ooh, stop sharing.
All right.
All right.
As
So-
Emily is setting up, can I make just a quick comment? I forgot to note, as people told me right before, that we answer the questions under the question and answer section. We can't use the chat function. So encourage you to take a look at that. And if you find something particularly compelling, save the information because I don't think we're able to post the Q&A. That's all. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, so I am going to give you guys information on what I would be looking for if I was doing an audit of a battery consolidator or sorter. So during audits, Green Eye Partners does on-site audits, due diligence audits, and we do compliance audits. So I'm just going to give you a brief intro into what I would be looking for if I was coming on site to your facility around batteries. Let's see, there we go. All right, so what we're going to look over are examples of common batteries that we would be seeing, personal protection equipment or PPE, safety controls around that, what type of employee training you have, designated areas for handling batteries in the warehouse, different labeling of batteries, hazardous waste and universal waste labeling, packaging of batteries, and then I'll give you a little couple slides brief on import exporting of batteries. So just common examples of batteries that you would probably be handling. So you have your basic alkaline, nickel metal hydride, nickel cadmium, you have your zinc carbon. So if you had hearing aids, lithium metal, lithium ion, so different types of lithium ion batteries. So making sure that employees are able to identify different types of components that could contain batteries and the different types of batteries that there are, so the different chemistries. So I'd want to make sure that if you had car type lead acid or non-spillable batteries, that they're handled properly, and that employees are able to give me examples of different types of batteries and items. So I'd be looking like, do they know that some power supplies have batteries, kid toys, right? Hearing aids. So making sure that the on-site employees are able to identify, hey, any of these different types of components could contain batteries. The number one priority when I'm doing an on-site audit is making sure that there's safety controls, okay? So possible sample audit questions. I'd look to see if the employees who are handling the batteries have and utilize proper PPE. Okay, so common PPE around handling batteries could include gloves, eye protection, closed-toed shoes, sometimes work shirts or aprons. So for closed-toed shoes, I'm not saying that I'm looking for steel-toed shoes. I'm making sure that they have closed-toed, maybe something different than like runners or trainers, something that's going to protect them if they're moving pallets or they're handling heavy batteries. When I'm looking to see what type of PPE that they're handling or that they're using for handling batteries, I'm also going to double check that there's been a hazard assessment on this PPE. So how has the facility identified what PPE to use, and have they done a thorough assessment, documentation, objective evidence that they've analyzed that their employees should be using this PPE? I'd also look for where the batteries are stored. If they're handling lithium ion or lead acid, I'd want to make sure that there's a spill kit or a containment system close by. Can the employee who's handling the batteries identify where that is? So that was an easy, quick question I'd ask. I'd also make sure that there's an eye wash station. Is it within walking distance? Is it unobstructed? So there's not any pallets in front of it. I can easily walk to it from the handling of the battery area. I'd also want to look to see if there's any compromised batteries. And then I would want the employees to explain to me what they would do with leaking or smoldering batteries, or in case there's a thermal event. So I'd have this communication. It's not just going to happen with management. It's going to happen with the employees who are handling the batteries, whether that's management or not. And then I'd ask them to identify different types of compromised batteries. Are they able to tell me what a compromised battery looks like, right? Could be swollen, could be gooey, could have like a weird smell to it. Do the employees know how to identify those compromised batteries and then what to do with those compromised batteries? During this walkthrough as well, I'd make sure that people are trained on it properly, right? So how frequent are employees trained on handling batteries? Is it conducted at new hire? Is it conducted annually? One frequent question I get is who should be trained on batteries, right? Who should be trained on handling batteries? If you have employees who are receiving material, who are dismantling material or sorting material, and if they can be touching batteries at those points, all of those employees need to be trained on battery handling. It's not just the employees who are labeling, packaging, and shipping out batteries. I'd also want to know, how are you measuring the competency? As we know, people retain about 20–25% of the information provided to them. So how are you making sure that they're able to then handle batteries properly and understood the training that was completed? Does the training include a spill, fire, or compromised identification and management? The employees that are doing the labeling and the shipping, are they going through DOT shipping or universal waste labeling requirements? Can the employees describe processes they're trained on? Can they describe, just like the last slide, what to do with a smoldering or compromised battery? And then, has there been a designated employee that's taken the HM181 or the DOT training? So for signing manifests, labeling, and shipping. So it's not just the on-site rep that I'm working with during this audit. I'm talking to different employees, I'm identifying, I'm watching what employees are doing, and I'm making sure that everybody's trained appropriately. One of the other key things I'm going to be looking for from the start of this walkthrough is there a designated area for the universal waste storage? That is key. So is there a fire, smoke, or heat detection monitoring system? So what is close by to this universal waste storage area, and what type of monitoring do they have there? Is it close to anything that could contain fuel? So anything that's combustible or flammable? Is it next to an emergency exit, right? All of these things, if you have a thermal event, as we know, thermal events can burn at 1200 degrees for lithium ion batteries. Is the universal waste area in an appropriate area in the warehouse? Are battery handling or storage areas consolidated or scattered throughout the warehouse? So this is another key one. As I'm walking through the facility, am I seeing buckets of batteries throughout the facility, right? So if you have employees who are receiving batteries, who are sorting batteries, or dismantling batteries and components, and they're creating their daily buckets, are those buckets being sent to the universal waste storage area? Are they being taped at the time that they're being dismantled or put into these buckets? Or am I finding buckets of batteries that are not properly taped and not stored correctly? So that's a common one that we'll see, we're always on the lookout for, because it's dangerous, right? So if you have a thermal event that's in your universal waste storage area, and you have buckets of batteries throughout your entire facility, you're putting everyone at risk. So we're confirming that in the designated area, there's emergency response equipment and eye wash. Everybody understands that there's no storage of batteries outside. Is that part of your protocol? where are compromised batteries kept and how are they labeled? Are they labeled as hazardous waste? And then, just as I said, I'm keeping a lookout for batteries in areas not designated for storage. So like I said, the tear down areas are the key area that we're going to find batteries that are not labeled and not stored properly, because people are doing their processes and they sometimes get forgotten, or there's not a written protocol to identify that it needs to be brought to the universal waste storage area. This is an example of what the labeling should look like for some universal waste. So your start accumulation date is key. If you're starting a bucket, I'll hear people say, well, we just started that bucket and we're gonna then start our universal waste once we get a little bit fuller, or we're gonna put it on next week. Once you receive those batteries, you need to have that start accumulation date. So you'll have one solid start accumulation date, and you'll then have those chemistry of batteries put into that bin. We're going to be confirming that the containers are in good shape, right? That the labeling of hazardous waste versus hazardous materials and universal waste is understood by the battery sorter, consolidator, labeling person. Is the company aware of and conforming to state and federal laws? How do you keep up to date on that? So I'd want to look for your legal and other requirements. Who's responsible for those legal and other requirements? How do you know that state laws haven't changed or that you're in compliance with the labeling of your specific jurisdiction? And just a side note that gets missed quite a bit is if containers are over 66 pounds of lithium batteries, they must be labeled as hazardous material per the DOT, okay? So the DOT wants hazardous materials labeled while storing these batteries. Some people will put the hazardous materials as they're shipping out if it's 66 pounds or more, but the DOT wants that hazardous materials language on any bin that's 66 pounds of lithium batteries. Here's just an example of the packaging of the used spent batteries that I'd be looking for, right? So you have alkaline, zinc. These batteries may be packaged and stored together unless you have a specific requirement from a downstream vendor that wants them segregated. So I would make sure that you have the sturdy container, box, drum, or pail, and that you'll be able to contain the weight of the batteries. And then you have that universal waste labeling. Right, so that bottom box there is just an example of what it could be looking like once it's packaged. And just to note, packaging requirements will be different for different types of batteries. And then for packaging non-leaking lead acid batteries, it's going to be a little bit different, right? So pallets must be sturdy. So I'm going to make sure that you're not packaging it on old used pallets that don't appear to be reliable. I want to make sure that it can hold the weight of the batteries, that there's not nails or sticking up that could come in contact with the batteries. I'm going to make sure that you're putting a piece of cardboard on the pallet to keep the batteries from slipping if the pallet is moved. And then I'm going to confirm that you're labeling it as universal waste. And then packaging lithium metal and lithium ion batteries. So I'm going to be looking for this type of storage as you're sorting batteries through chemistries when you're receiving them or during the sorting phase, right? So lithium batteries must be completely enclosed. We call it the ravioli wrapping, with tape or placed individually sealed plastic bags before putting the batteries into storage or shipping containers, right? Lithium batteries cause fires when not stored properly at facilities or in transportation. I say I probably am on site at least twice a year where I'm seeing a lithium ion thermal event, all right? And then just to reiterate, if it exceeds 66 pounds, your labeling changes. Okay, so import-export of batteries is a bit of a can of worms. I could be here all day talking about this and probably would not be able to communicate everything around this. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview, right? So the Basel Convention on the control of transboundary movements of hazardous waste and their disposal is the most comprehensive global environmental treaty on hazardous and other waste. It regulates the transboundary movement of hazardous waste. The US is the only country with universal waste designation. All other countries consider batteries as hazardous waste. Okay, so that's key. So if you're ever exporting to Canada or Mexico, you'll know that they're calling it hazardous waste. For exporting the batteries from the US EPA requires notification through the CDX online system. The US EPA requests permission from the competent authority of the importing country. Once the permission is received, they advise the US exporter. An authority of consent, or an AOC, is valid for 1 to 3 years, and export totals are reported out at end year. So exporting batteries from the US without a valid AOC is considered an illegal export of hazardous waste. So I'm going to give you an example of what to look for. So whether you're directly exporting or indirectly exporting, doesn't matter. You need to make sure, if you're indirectly exporting, that your broker of batteries or your downstream vendor is able to provide an updated acknowledgement of consent. What you'll be looking for with this is you're going to make sure that it's evident that it's from the US EPA. It includes the number of shipments allowed and the waste stream identification. Okay, so this is what the first page would look like. And just to note, reputable smelters that you'll see, or furnaces that you'll see batteries going to, you'll see them going to Korea, you'll see them going to Belgium, Canada, and Mexico. Okay, so those are very reputable smelters or furnaces that most likely your batteries have hit before. So you're going to confirm the first page, and then you're going to double check the second page. What you're looking for in the second page is you're making sure that the number of shipments allowed and the waste stream identification is included. Okay, so making sure that the waste stream, the chemistry of batteries that you are directly or indirectly exporting, is listed on this AOC. And like I said, it doesn't matter if you're going through a broker or you're going through multiple vendors, you need to cover yourself and make sure that this AOC is on file for your exports. And that is it. Here's my contact information, and yeah.
Thank you, Emily. Great. We're actually a little ahead of time, so we could.
Yeah, this is Sarah. I can jump in with a couple questions while we're switching presentations. Some of you are putting questions about DOT in the Q&A, which is perfect because we have Dan from DOT here. So I think a lot of those we can get to in the Q&A, so please take a look there. We do have a question from someone who's using the call to recycle battery boxes. They ship them with weight less than 66 pounds and follow company rules on taping or bagging lithium, ion, lithium metal, and other rechargeable batteries. There is no universal waste label on the box, except check off for batteries and the date of start accumulation. Is that okay? I don't know if you could follow that, Emily, otherwise you could look at it in the Q&A.
Yeah, I don't know if our DOT guy wants to answer this one, because I would look at it. Call choose boxes are so specific, right? With their instructions, they give you the box, they give you the instructions. So I'm not quite sure how the labeling's not on there, to be frank with you.
Yeah, I think they're asking about the universal waste labeling, which those are a separate set of rules from DOT. They're hazardous waste rules that most states have adopted. I don't know, Jennifer, if you know for that one. I think there are things that DOT is looking for in terms of shipping, but there's something a hazardous waste inspector would be looking for, and that's where like the start accumulation date matters and the universal waste use batteries and things like that, right?
From my perspective, universal waste labels are different. That's not what we're going to be looking for. We're going to be looking for the hazard class labels. So if you're shipping fully regulated with a class 9 label per se, you have to make sure that that's present and not obscured. So that's one thing that we look for. I know the presentation, there was a universal waste label over it. You just have to make sure that those are separate and not obscuring each other. The reference, I'm still working on the reference number for the 66-pound rule. I was flipping through my book, so I answered the question with not an answer yet. So for that person that asked that question, I'll get that answer to you as soon as I can. Was there another question I can answer right now?
Should we do one more, Sarah?
Yeah, there's a question about the lithium guidelines apply to all EV batteries. And I'm thinking that's
Yes.
a reference to the DOT.
That will be in our guide. I can flip through that real quick. Why don't we continue on and I can get that answer typed in the question and answer portion. So I'm not
Okay,
holding everything up.
and maybe we can post in some of these also a link to your excellent guide too for people to have as a reference.
Okay.
But yeah, maybe in the interest of time, Amanda, we can keep moving on to the next speaker and we'll keep an eye on the Q&A and we can get some more clarification about the universal waste question.
Great. No, thank you. All right. And next we will have Neil present with Cascade Asset Management. Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Amanda. Hopefully you can hear and see everything okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay, well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm Neil Peters Michaud, CEO of Cascade. Been having fun with batteries for a long time. Amanda talked a little bit about our company. So we've been around for about 23 years, about 60,000 square feet of processing space in those 3 locations. And we're primarily collecting our electronics, including loose batteries and batteries in devices from businesses and organizations. So not as much from the general public, though we do provide some support to collection events through our corporate customers. We try and reuse as much as we can. So some of this presentation is going to be talking about fixing and repairing devices with damaged batteries. So by weight, about 30% of everything that comes in can be reused. By count, it's pretty significant. So we're reselling about 15,000 devices per month. Most of the stuff's picked up in our vehicles, and I say that because it's important because there's a lot of challenge on the DOT regulations as far as just shipping batteries. So we've kind of made special considerations when it's our staff packaging and identifying items on site to look out for loose batteries that might not be properly contained or damaged batteries, as opposed to when we have to work through third parties and FedEx shipping in devices. So we're getting batteries in a whole variety of things, whether it's laptops, tablets, smartphones, of course, lead acid batteries and UPSs. We also see medical devices, and we're starting to see that whole set of Internet of Things, wearable devices, unique items which are smaller and have smaller batteries, and it's definitely becoming a challenge. And so I would definitely say that batteries are currently our most significant safety and hazard risk in our operation. I'm going to start off with this video. Some people may have seen it. It is a video of a thermal event that happened at our facility. So this is in our Madison location a couple years ago. And you're going to see some stuff on the bottom right corner where someone is disassembling an iPhone with a polymer battery in it. We'll just kind of look at it so you can see the challenges. So the close-up really helps a little bit. You get a sense on he's taking this apart. It bends the battery a bit. You have your smoke, your flame. And then he's following our training, which is to knock it to the floor, use tongs and put it into a container, a fire can with a lid that you open with your foot pedal. And inside that fire can has the cell block X material, which is something resold by Call to Recycle, but made by another company. And that's used to help extinguish the fire. What's also amazing is you see the person working next to him and she actually doesn't even notice this is happening. It happens so quickly. So it's amazing what, Emily was saying, if she's seeing a couple of these events every year when she's going to audit firms, that's, this is a significant risk. And I'm not sure how many other people have seen it, but we've seen a few of these over the times, and we have to manage the potential for this happening and obviously try and prevent it from happening. So, we're seeing that this is taking place because especially the polymer batteries are going to be flexible. And so if they're glued in and they're being pried apart, that could create a reaction where the different cells in the battery start reacting and creating that thermal event. You could have a pack punctured by a tool. So we might be using a screwdriver to disassemble something, and it could damage the, if we're taking the case off, it might go through a very thin case and then damage the battery pack. We had an issue once too, which we had to correct, when people were taking a hard-cased laptop battery and tossing it into a bin, even though they've taped the contacts, and it might have hit a polymer battery in just the wrong spot, and then it started swelling up. So being careful that you just don't throw these things around while they're loose is something to be careful of. Obviously, the short circuiting, if you have the contacts that are exposed and impact another battery. And then, of course, we want to keep batteries out of our shredder. So we've got shredding, and we also send our products down to downstream processors, and we want to make sure they don't contain a battery that might get caught in their shredders. So for us to prevent battery fires, we try and put in the controls that auditors like Emily and others are looking for. So we want to have processes in place that identify what are the best, the standard operating procedures for how to handle batteries and devices with batteries when we encounter them. Have the right equipment in place, and that's going to be the the PPE, as well as the supplies and the tools that we use to manage the batteries, and then having training. So those are the three things that we need to work on and have in place to look at trying to prevent battery fires in the first place. So when we're refurbishing items with batteries, there's two things that we're looking for. First of all, we want to retain the life of good quality tested working batteries as long as we can. Reuse is obviously better from an environmental and economic standpoint. So we are looking to test and evaluate both the battery health as well as the capacity readings of the batteries. So we will be inspecting devices and individual batteries for damage. So we're going to look for swelling like you see in this photo. If there's any kind of burn marks or if any kind of leakage, those are things that we will pull and consider damaged batteries or in the DDR battery class. Also, because we're reselling these items with the warranty and we have the eSteward certification, we need to make sure they pass a load test and retain at least 60% of their original charge. So that's good to make sure that our next buyers don't have to find a recycling home for them later. So that's great and easy when it's easily removable batteries. The challenge, of course, is those glued in batteries that we're seeing in more and more devices. So it is in not only the iPhones and the iPads, we see them in some Surface Pros, we see them in certain laptops, other devices that are very small. And so we have these small heat tables that are in different parts of our facility, and that will melt, that will heat up a pad or this table here to about 100 degrees centigrade. And it's we leave the devices on there for about 2 to 3 minutes to try and melt the adhesive so that we can pry apart the devices. So I'm going to show you this video here of, let me just manage the volume here. We actually had a good story where Washington Post came through and did a story about what they called the explosive problem with recycling iPads, iPhones, and other gadgets. So in this presentation, there's a link to that 5-minute story. It's excellent. I highly recommend anybody taking a look at it. This is a segment from that video just showing what it takes to pull a battery out of an iPad. And we use a lot of the iFixit tools, and you'll see that here. I will do a slight disclaimer. You'll notice our technician Azaro is not wearing safety glasses here. We got a little worked up in the filming of it, so he wasn't in the demo wearing safety glasses, but they all wear safety glasses now. So I'll start playing this. You'll see we've got the heat table here, just trying to get the whole device warmed up. This is definitely a damaged, unusable iPad. And the challenge is really separating off the panel from the screen from the backing. That's one part. And then the second part is having to use some of these tools to still pry the glue that is completely covering this 3 battery pack unit of lithium ion polymer battery onto the device. So it's very fragile and it could easily be bent. So the goal is to try and get it off that glued backing in one piece. So if you probably saw at the end, there's kind of 2 strips on the sides that really hold it in place. So it's a challenge. So when we're disassembling items with batteries, we have to deal with the issue of carefully removing the fasteners. And one of the other things that's a challenge is there's a lot of very, very small fasteners that also often have proprietary screws. And the screens may need to be, or these screws and these other fasteners might be really close to the batteries. So the challenge is to not have your tools slip and then potentially puncture the batteries. So that's the first thing. So we work with all of our disassembly staff to just carefully identify and understand where the batteries may be in the device. So when they're taking it apart and can't even see the battery yet, they know to not nick the battery. For the glued-in battery, we've changed our protocols a little bit. We've worked with our recyclers, and we find that if we can remove the circuit boards, any memory sticks, any flash memory that we would want to destroy on site so that the data is destroyed, we're going to pull those out of the unit, and then we will leave the glued battery on the case, and that can now go to our recycler, and then they can process it more safely. They tend to then put it into a deep freeze, so it helps to make the material inert, so it's not as explosive when they're recycling it. And the aluminum backing is not an issue for them. So that's been a good safety improvement that we've done. And I highly recommend everyone check with your downstreams to see if you could leave a glued-in battery on a back before you send it out for recycling. So we're really only melting that glue in our disassembly stations when it's necessary because we can't access other materials that need to be removed from the device as part of our disassembly process. So we generate a lot of intact batteries. So most of the batteries, thankfully, are intact, and that means they're not damaged. We do have our staff at our disassembly stations throughout the facility tape their contacts for any non-alkaline batteries as soon as possible. So we got tape guns at every location. They'll put them in the small accumulation bins, which then get consolidated several times a day into a designated battery taping area, where we have a person who, with additional training, can verify that the chemistries are sorted properly. Any polymer batteries are also going to be bubble wrapped. That was a change ever since they had the hard case puncture one of the polymer batteries. And then again, sort by chemistry, package, label the boxes for DOT shipment. And what's also nice here is we can get by with having 1 or 2 people that have gone through the very detailed DOT hazardous material training related to the labeling of batteries. And that's our quality control person. But everybody else is getting a familiarity of the battery processes that we have. So we're having general battery training for all of our staff, including how to deal with a potential fire issue. Of course, then we follow all the universal waste rules that Emily was talking about. So for dealing with damaged lithium-ion battery handling, we've generated quite a few of these in the past. This is only like in 5 months. Over 3,400 damaged lithium-ion batteries have been identified in our operations. A lot of them are coming through and we're testing devices, and we're seeing that they're starting to be swollen, and others we might find out that have been buried in our bins that customers ship to us. So once we discover them in our facility, we're going to bring them to that special sort area, tape them, and we are using the bins with the Cell Block X. So we are piling them into those bins, and the maximum amount that you can store in one of those bins is 132 net pounds of batteries, and then additional weight, of course, for the Cell Block X material as well as the drum itself. Again, special DOT battery labeling requirements we just talked about. And yes, this gets expensive. So, figure the list price that Call to Recycle puts on their website is you buy like 2 to 4 drums at a time, but it's $625 a drum. So when we look at the average amount of batteries that we can put in there based on what their typical weight, that comes out to about $2.50 a battery. And it's not like we're charging our customers $2.50 to recycle each battery. So it gets very expensive. So the last thing I'll touch on is emergency response. So, we want to prevent the battery fires from happening in the first place from these processes, training, and equipment. But in the event there's a fire, these are the cans that we use. Standard fire can you can get anywhere. We have the cell block X that is inside of those those cans. Tongs and heat resistant gloves are by any area where they're going to be disassembling batteries, or in the few areas where we might be doing the repair of devices with batteries. We have Class B fire extinguishers at our locations, which, as we've worked with our fire marshal, understands that that's another option that we can use, as well as the Class D fire extinguishers I know that other people use. And as Emily said, one of the things we did too is to make sure that we can keep these workstations around away from other combustible materials, because as you can see, the flame happens really quickly. And if we can especially keep them away from cardboard gaylords and other things, that's important. And this is a part of our regular emergency response training for all of our staff. So the person in that video had actually, at the beginning of the presentation, he had been trained, he had only been with us for about 3 months and had been trained a couple weeks earlier on how to handle batteries. So it was really good to see that the training was put into proper use by making sure that he was able to contain the fire right away, though additional training to prevent it in the first place is always good too. So some of the lessons that we've learned in handling batteries for reuse and recycling is we work to educate customers. So here's an example of a flyer that we've produced for customers. It helps to explain how the battery recycling process works, how they can reduce the potential damage by just keeping batteries in units as much as possible, and what to do if we see things like damaged batteries and how we handle that. So getting education out to customers is helpful. The regulations are complex. So what we need to do is try and figure out how do we take these regulations and put them into trainable documents and standard operating procedures. Our employees don't need to know the regulation. They just need to know how they're supposed to package the batteries and how they're supposed to label the containers. So we make sure that they understand that. We'll have ongoing training, reminders for staff. We've got signage up. We do quarterly stand down day trainings, and batteries is one of our priorities. And then the other thing that's really helpful is having regular inspections throughout the facility. So we do walkthroughs on a monthly basis, weekly basis. So just verify the supplies are in place. All the cans have the cell block X in it, things like that. And then we obviously definitely work with our downstream processors, learn from them on the best practices to make sure that we are preparing the batteries in a way that is best for them to take into their system, so they don't have to do as much handling, and they can also give us the best price. The last thing is just to track and monitor this. So as we've been tracking the amount of damaged batteries that have come through, we've realized this is expensive, this is dangerous. We need to invest in the preventative activities to manage and mitigate the potential harm. And so it's good to measure that and then to demonstrate that we're making some improvements. So that whole process of track, measure, and then improve is really important for us. So that's what I prepared today, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and we can move on to the next one.
Thank you, Neil. We'll check and see.
Yeah, there's a couple here. One is, I think the process you were showing with the iPad, Neil, what's the average cost to process an old iPad in this way, and who's currently paying for it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in that example, and if you look up that the device on iFixit, it says it's a very difficult fix, and it might take an hour and 20 minutes. And I think in the demonstration purpose there, it took the person 40 minutes to do. I would say on average, like replacing a battery in an iPad is about 20 to 30 minutes when someone has a good amount of experience with it. We're only going to do that if we can resell the device. So we figure out our labor and parts costs to be able to do that repair and put in a new battery should get covered by what we can sell the device for. So if it costs us in parts and labor $60 to do it, we need to be able to sell that device for at least $100, which is often the case. So if it makes sense for us to make that investment, we will, but that's how we get paid for it. We're not going to do those kind of repairs if we can't sell it and make our money back.
Another quick question while we work on the transition. Has anyone asked you to disassemble e-cigarettes to recover the batteries?
Yes, we actually had some come to us early on, maybe a few years ago, and we were trying to figure out how to deal with it. We decided to put that on what we call our non-conforming equipment list. We don't want to accept it. And I was just talking to another processor that has been going into managing it, and it's very difficult. They weren't able to, it's very small as far as accessing the batteries, so that was an issue. And then they had the other potential regulatory issue for substances that might be included in the e-cigarettes, such as THC that people are now using, or other narcotics that might be in there besides your regular nicotine products. So we've stayed away from it. We tried it a little bit and it was too much of a headache, so we do not accept them.
I want to add in on that. This is Jennifer. I took apart 37 of them. Some of them sparked, one went into thermal runaway. When we initially got started, we thought disassembly might be a way to deal with them, but after we identified a myriad of safety issues, it's just not worth it. And we do ship ours as both nicotine waste and battery waste. They get incinerated. That part's unfortunate, but it's a safety issue. That's all.
Great. Thank
All
you.
right, let's see. Neil, while you're stopping your sharing, we're getting the next presentation up. I do have a follow-up question on the iPads for you. So if you don't repair and resell it, how much would it cost you to disassemble it and get it ready for recycling? So yeah, I guess what do you do with iPads that you're not going to refurbish?
Yeah, we do disassemble them and recover the component parts. It is a net cost for us. I mean, it's several dollars to do it. It depends on the labor costs and how many we can do an hour. So destructive disassembly is a little bit quicker, but it is a cost, and we charge our customers a processing fee to help cover that cost. There's a little bit of value that is coming from the circuit boards on there. Yeah, we're really hoping to reuse them. I don't know if I can say pricing on something like this, but it's a negligible cost, but it is something that we need to recover our labor fees.
Thank you. Thanks, Neil. So we'll have Eric go next with Dynamic Lifecycle Innovations. Thanks, Eric.
Yes, good afternoon. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, and can hear you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Again, Eric from Dynamic Lifecycle Innovations. We are a end-of-life electronics recycling company located in Onalaska, Wisconsin, as well as Nashville, Tennessee. We also have an extensive ITAD division as well. Today, I'm going to touch on more of the end-of-life processing and what we are seeing currently with our collectors, generators, other recyclers when it comes to end-of-life processing of battery containing devices and electronics in general. So we are we deal a lot on the municipality, cities, just different departments and organizations that handle material that come directly from a consumer, from a resident. We handle that material also from other recyclers that bring that material in from their residents or other municipalities and collectors throughout the state and the Midwest. One of the biggest things that we are currently seeing is that with the rapid change in the technology, we are seeing an expanded amount of recyclable material that has batteries inside of it. So cell phones, tablets, toys, Fitbits, the material annually seems to be getting smaller and lighter, therefore reflecting more cost to a recycler like Dynamic, and then trickles down to the partners. So one thing that we are doing on a processing as an end-of-life processor with large shredding capabilities is we need to bring in all mixed electronics as they would have batteries in them. So before anything enters into our shredding, our shredder, it has to be run down specific sort lines, and every item has to be touched, whether it has a battery or not, just to confirm that the battery is either removed or it is a device that does not have a battery. So as we do that process, that obviously we are looking to sort and process the maximum amount of pounds per day to bring that value back to our customers as far as price goes, as well as for dynamic. So anything we can do to help educate our customers is one thing that makes a big difference into the overall cost of the management of battery containing devices. At Dynamic, we train our staff on an annual basis. New hires are trained as part of the onboarding process. And then any specific job function that handles direct with batteries on a daily basis, ongoing training happens as needed, quarterly, monthly, as needed as the industry continues to evolve. Couple just key points here is obviously when we're talking about shredding batteries or shredding in batteries, lithium ion batteries burn extremely hot. Like Emily mentioned, I think around like 1200 degrees, I believe she said. And then lithium ion battery fires cost waste recycling and other scrap operators over $1.2 billion annually in just the US and Canada. So that could be facilities, material, injuries to employees. So it's obviously a huge focus, a major focus for anybody in the recycling world that deals with batteries. So one thing that we like to do when we're educating or sharing our knowledge of battery containing devices with our customers is making sure that we are sharing with them what we're seeing. So a couple of pictures here, the one of the Gaylord it's like Gaylord of battery containing devices. It could be remote controls, it could be toys, it could be, GPS units, watches, Fitbits, iPads, anything like that, anything that we see nowadays with a battery. We do ask our customers or our collectors to help educate their residents as the consumer bringing the battery containing devices in, to at least segregate that material so it can be kept separate from their other electronics. Sometimes some of these facilities, counties, municipalities might not have enough manpower to manage or regulate what the consumer is bringing in. So we help provide, when asked, signage or training material that they can post or show to their residents that would help them keep the battery containing devices separated from the rest of the electronics, which will in turn help the overall cost of the program. If we can bring them that material into our facility already segregated, even though the batteries may be still within the devices, that helps us manage that material more streamlined than having to treat. We still have to treat everything as it has a battery, but we can run it down our sort line a lot quicker if the battery containing devices are kept separate. Both Neil and Emily touched on the packaging and transportation of batteries. So we follow the same universal waste regulations and DOT regulations through our logistics department and our training as the industry follows. So I won't get in too far into that. Yeah, one thing that we find that is extremely valuable is just over communicating with our customers. They, like I said, some of them might not know what they are shipping on a weekly, on a load by load basis. So we're asking, to be as specific as possible with providing packing lists. That also helps in not having any extra surprises when it comes to the time of settling the material on the cost structure. Just for an example, we will see that battery containing devices take us 4 to 5 times longer to process and sort than then device down our sort line before it goes into our shredder than what devices without batteries take. So hence the reason why the extra cost that comes along with the battery containing devices. And then touched on the cost, and then if they can have the material separated out, if they can pull the batteries, we do work with our customers to provide them battery packaging guidelines if they're going to ship the batteries to us, based off of the DOT regulations and the hazardous material regulations. So if they have the bandwidth and the time to do that, we do prefer that we get the batteries managed the way taped, and then segregated by chemistry and shipped to us so we can handle it downstream from there. So that is all I have. Is there any questions?
There's one question that's kind of a, I guess, a broader question for Eric or Neil. It seems like electronic products need to be redesigned for disassembly, for safer disassembly. What could be done in this area? For example, if they, let's see, if they are contained in a device, must they really be glued in? I mean, I think we could do a whole webinar on this, but do either of you have quick takes that you want to add in response to that?
Yeah, that would be ideal. I can start with that. It would be ideal if every battery containing device had a backing like a remote control does, to pop off the back and remove the batteries. It's not realistic. Obviously, a lot of the smaller battery containing devices nowadays are a fashion. They're appealing to wear because people wear them. So they're more streamlined. Like Neil mentioned, there is innovation out there now with freezing that will help on that embedded battery when it comes to end of life processing, and also potential like underwater shredding, so you can shred underwater and not have to worry about obviously the ignition of the material. So I think the innovation is it's behind in our mind, it's behind, the innovation is a little bit behind the actual devices as they're being innovated to be more appealing to the consumer. But I think it will catch up at some point just because it's going to have to.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the Washington Post piece talks a little bit about this, why devices are no longer designed to have removable batteries, and how that was such a great feature before. So it would, from a design for recycling standpoint, yes, we want to avoid the glue, that it really has an issue. Also where the batteries are located, if they're not accessible and not replaceable by the user. And it also creates a one-time use feature that people can't extend the life of their products unless they bring it into an authorized repair center, which is a real problem. I think the other thing to take a look at is, long-term other battery chemistries that may be less hazardous for handling. And so, how can we look at that from a design perspective? But as I mentioned, handling batteries is definitely our biggest risk right now. People are potentially going to get harmed and have gotten harmed from handling these devices, and fires have taken down facilities. So I think manufacturers need to recognize that they're putting out products that are difficult for people to handle downstream.
Sarah, if we're good, I do have a couple questions that we have put together. If we're okay.
Yeah, it looks like we're pretty quiet in the Q&A right now. So yeah, you can move on to the next thing.
Yeah, just a question I think for Neil and Eric. Like, what do you recommend facilities do to get to know their local fire departments? Maybe that's just walk on over.
I'm happy to start with that. We know our local fire departments very well. They come through on a pretty regular basis. And actually, it's been good because we've come to them with this challenge, and part of it is they're learning at the same time. And so we've shared the best practices that we've had. They've taken a look at our facility. But the best thing is that they are, one thing is that they are coming into our facilities on a regular basis for their typical inspections. We have a contingency action plan on file at each of our locations. And so that includes a location, where we're consolidating the batteries and an understanding of, just the types of materials that we're handling, how much we might have at any given time. So they're prepared for it. I think it's been a good collaborative process, and we have a shared interest in preventing battery fires. And so they're not the enemy in any ways. They're definitely a good support role. And they come through anyways for doing inspections. So we just say, hey, this is a risk. Help us work on this together.
Yeah, I can echo Neil's response there. Dynamic as well has a close relationship with our local fire department, especially here in Wisconsin, where we do most of where we have the shredding facility. We're kind of out away from anything close, so we do have to have that close relationship. Take their guidance. We did over the last 12 to 18 months. We do now store all of our the batteries that we remove. We then get out of our main facility and into a separate inside storage area at the end of every day to help mitigate any potential risk when nobody is in the building. So that just a little more of a peace of mind. But also, like Neil said, the batteries and safety of the batteries for our team members and just our overall business is one of the top priorities that we deal with on a daily basis.
Thank you to you both. Thanks, Eric. Go ahead.
Amanda, I just wanted to note, Eric was saying that he would move the batteries outside to the storage area. So during my presentation, I said that we'd look to make sure there's not batteries stored outside. What I want to clarify is during the receiving phase or during the sorting stage, we're looking to make sure batteries aren't just outside on pallets. There's very specific protocols around storing batteries outside. So I know that Jennifer can shed a little bit more light on that, but a lot of facilities are storing batteries in specific areas outside to mitigate that risk of fire during the night. So I wanted to clarify on that.
Yeah, thank you.
I could just add that, the fire code gets grandfathered in like every other code, but the new code that should be adopted in the next couple of years goes from having one sentence on lithium batteries to a whole section on outdoor storage as well. If you're constructing anything right now, you probably should look at the up and coming fire code. I neglected to put it on our website because EPA found a copy for me and sent it to me. So I was right. It really was hard to Google. It wasn't just me. So we'll post that. And I would encourage, if you're looking to build right now or have started, to see if you can implement some of these practices, because I think they are worthwhile. And the second webinar, I talk about fire codes at the beginning, if you want to go back and look at that webinar.
Thank you. All right, we'll let Dan go next and get some extra minutes here. If Dan's able to share.
Yeah, I was just answering some questions, and it's my understanding that what would be more helpful for everybody is just to be able to answer some questions that you all might have, unless you want me to do quick presentation or something like that. I could do that, but for questions and answers, I apologize. Some of my my typing skills aren't up to par in getting your questions answered on the Q&A portion as quickly as I would like to. So I had a question about, does DOT allow 800 pounds of alkaline batteries be shipped in plastic drums rated for Y250 or 550 pounds? No packing requirements are required for 49 CFR or alkaline batteries. And 172.101 special provisions, 130 exempts use for spent batteries less than 9. My answer there is that, you know, assuming if you're referring to UN standard packaging, that packaging is tested to a certain weight. It's not recommended to exceed that because it therefore it's probably not going to perform in regular transportation. That's really the whole goal, right? Is to make sure that it gets from point A to point B. So if you're talking about a UN standard packaging, whether you're using it for DDR or you're using it for a fully regulated new battery, say, or new batteries, it's really going to depend, and you're really going to want to make sure that it doesn't exceed that. Now, there's certain exceptions for non-UN standard packaging. So that would be in, I believe it is, I wrote it here. It's going to be in 170, hold on a second. I just lost the question here. 1 second. That reference is going to be 173, 159D. It allows for use of non-spec packaging, but it gets really specific depending on your mode of transportation. So it's going to vary on size. And certain types of transportation is going to make you permanently affix it to the skid or the way that you're going to transport a pallet. Is there any questions that somebody just wants to take their microphone off mute? Just ask. It's probably a little easier for us to do it that way.
I don't think they can. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But
I
was
think
thinking-
I think people could probably raise their hands. We can test that out. We haven't done that in the other webinars. So if you do want to
while
ask a
that's going
question
on,
live.
Yeah. Do you think, Dan, we could maybe just share what the cover looks like for that guidance document for folks
Yeah.
to look up? And I can do that too, but if you haven't.
I have a PowerPoint presentation that I already generated based on that document that I can share. If I can figure out, okay, share screen.
And Jennifer, we can put links. Is that right? Like for the recording?
Yeah,
data?
I've dropped
Sure.
links a couple times in the Q&A to the PHMSA guide so people can scroll through that.
Thank you.
Otherwise, it's a pretty easy Google.
Okay.
Okay.
And while Dan's getting his screen up, Jennifer, people were asking about the fire code. I think we'll probably post that on the same webinar website. Is that correct?
Yeah, it should it should already be posted. The webinar is posted. I think I'm the only one whose slides are not posted because I wanted to, you know, I went a little crazy with those QR codes and I wanted to add some more links.
Right, but you said you got a copy of the fire code.
Oh,
Are you
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
be able to post
I'm
that?
sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, that needs to be posted as well.
Okay.
And I'll try and get that done in a few days. It depends on when our people can get to it, but I also can forward a copy if you have my email address, which is also on here.
Yeah, I'll drop that in the chat or in the Q&A in response to that question.
Right on. Thanks.
Can everybody see that guide? It'll have
I
some
can.
lithium-ion batteries. Okay. All right, we're good. So I provided this link to Amanda, and I'm sure she can send it out to everybody. It's also available on our website. So if you go to PHMSA /publications, there's a whole slew of helpful guides depending on what you're shipping, what you're transporting, and the lithium battery guide is there as well. That's just a few down on the list. So if you want hard copies of these, there's a tool or a method to where you can order them directly, and they'll come from our warehouse in DC, and they can send them right to your door, right to your company, if that's the way you want them, or you can download the PDF. So this is a pretty helpful guide. I use it all the time, just because when you're dealing with certain batteries, it kind of avoids you having to flip back and forth from the table, 172, 101 table. It has a lot of that information already there. So it breaks it down of first, it talks about, why they're regulated, gets into that. What's a cell versus a battery? So, there's different watt hours for the 173, 185 exception C, if you're shipping under that exception, and that's what commonly people use when they're shipping batteries that are new. Now, we're not talking about recycled batteries. We're not talking about DDR batteries. We're just talking about new batteries or batteries that are still in service, not at the end of their service life. So there's certain watt hours, and those watt hours have a big effect on the way that you're going to transport it. And they have a big effect on what kind of regulations you get out of, what kind of packaging requirements you get out of, or which ones you get yourself into. There was a question already about EV batteries. Now, EV batteries aren't going to be regulated under that specific exception, because generally they're over that watt hour. And I'll flip to the small size battery thing. And it talks about the thresholds there, watt hour ratings. So you're talking about for lithium ion batteries, it's your 20 for your cells, and that's where your cells become important. If you're shipping just cells, you're going to be going under that 20. Now, if you're shipping an entire battery, then you're going under the 60. So that's how that really applies to you. You can flip. How much time do I have?
We're doing
Go
well.
right
We
ahead.
have,
Okay,
Yeah.
you don't just keep going, and you can cut me off when you need to.
Yeah, why don't you,
Um,
I was thinking, like at 20 after, so.
Okay. So this section will be really important to a lot of people. Disposal, recycling. Now, you get out of a lot of the packaging requirements when it comes to using packing group 1, packing group 2, packing group 3, performance oriented packaging. It's going to be different if you're dealing with damaged or defective or recalled batteries. So your DDR, that stuff is generally going to be in a packing group 1 package or a special permitted package. Now, you're shipping under recycling because the nature of that is we're thinking that they're intrinsically safe. They're not showing any bulging, or that they probably have a potential of thermal runaway. So we want to get those to the recycler as soon as possible and make it relatively easy for the company doing that, the recycler, to do that. So there's a lot of regulations, a lot of regulatory exceptions when it comes to that wouldn't necessarily be the case if you're shipping it a brand new battery under the guidance of 172, 101 for that specific battery, whether it's alkaline or lithium battery or what have you. So this really gives you a lot of leeway. When we talk about testing requirements, you'll see that in there, 173 or 180, excuse me, 38.3, the UN testing criteria. A lot of your disposal batteries, you don't have access to any of those test reports, right? So we're assuming that, since you don't have access to that, we're just going to give you a break on that because you don't have those test reports. Now, it's different when you're talking about a fully regulated. So fully regulated battery, you're going to have the test reports to prove it. So if you don't have the test reports, you really only have a couple options there. So when you can destroy it, send it to you know, the recycler under that exception, or you can send it under damaged or defective. So that's like your two options there. Let's move on a little bit. Here's some of your different guide numbers. And with lithium batteries, lithium metal batteries, it's going to differ depending on whether they're packed or contained in equipment. And we rely on the company that's offering them in transportation to actually do the classification. We generally don't tell you how to classify it. However, if it doesn't pass the common sense test, obviously, if it's inside a vehicle and it's being transported or inside a scooter or something like that, then it's not going to be treated as a standalone battery. It's going to be treated as containing equipment, but it's up to the offerer to properly classify that. So when we're talking about batteries packed in equipment, we get a lot of exceptions with that as well, because again, packaging is our thing. The more packaging, generally the safer it's going to be, depending of course, if it's an appropriate or safe package. So if it's something already in equipment, if it's inside the scooter already and the scooter has a strong outer package, then therefore you have those requirements are for shipping that isn't going to be the same as, it's not going to be fully regulated. And then you go to the appropriate guides. So if you have troubles figuring out what really applies to you, this chart right here is pretty awesome for that. Goes down to have they passed tests. So the 38.3 test, if it's a no, you're going to fall to the right. So are they a prototype? If it's yes, you know, then you're going to go refer to 173, 185C for that. And then if it's a prototype, you have no, then it brings you to the right to redesign test and tells you all cells and batteries must be tested in accordance with the UN manual test criteria 38.3. Now, again, this isn't with, we're not talking about DDR at this point. This is again for new batteries. So if you're shipping fully regulated, and we had a question about fully regulated batteries, you know, EV batteries, that's going to be fully regulated because they exceed that threshold for your exceptions. So that's your markings going to look generally like what's in the depiction there, your class 9 label with the battery on it. So that's going to be your label. And depending on whether you're shipping by air, cargo aircraft only, label would be affixed as well. Now, again, you gotta make sure that nothing's obscured. Size requirements are going to be very important when we're talking about labels. So if the package can fit it, it should be the standard size, which is about 100 millimeters or roughly about 4 inches square on point. And then you have your UN standard marking that you can see with the UN with the little circle around it. Also, don't forget that you have to have the consignee or consignor, so the person taking responsibility for the shipment or offer of the shipment, as well as the proper shipping name and UNID number for these. Let's skip ahead a little bit. We'll show the difference of small cells batteries shipped under that exception of 173, 185C. So in this case, you're going to be using that marking that you see right there on your screen. Pretty common in day-to-day use. Just know that when you do that, you still need the proper shipping name and the UNID number also listed on that marking. So if it can't fit, you can put it next to the marking, but a lot of those that you get from a big vendor, there's a spot where you can add them, whether you handwrite it, that's fine too. Was there a question from Neil? Neil, do you have a question? I'm sorry, I was just
Yeah,
talking.
no, thank you, Dan. Yeah, I can't submit a question on here, so I figured.
Okay.
If people are transporting batteries using their own logistics and trucking, so like from a collection site to a recycler, or like for our case, from a client site to our processing facility, do we have to follow, do the batteries need to be separated by chemistry? Do they need to be labeled this way? Or is it different when it's shipped to that third-party recycler following the same DOT? Or does the same apply no matter who's transporting it?
So let me get this straight. You're shipping it from one of your facilities to the other?
Now, let's say it's just picked up from a municipal collection site in our own
Okay.
vehicle and then brought to one of our locations. If for some reason, they haven't sorted it by chemistry or packaged it, can we transport it as it is, or do they need to be properly packaged and containerized before shipping to our facility, before we transport it on our own vehicles to our facility?
That's kind of tricky because you wouldn't be able to properly package it if you don't really know what it is. So I think it would have to be sorted first and then appropriately packaged and marked before it goes into the transportation stream and over public roadways.
Makes sense. So the idea is that, yeah, you can't transport until it's properly sorted and.
Right. I mean,
okay.
yeah, until it's properly sorted and you don't know exactly what you have, therefore you can't properly mark it, you can't properly label it, you can't ensure that it's in the proper packaging. I'm assuming it's going under the exception for recycling.
Yeah, that would be correct.
So yeah, you would just follow the letter of that specific section of the regulation. So let's see. Under 173, 185D, you have a lithium battery cell or battery, including lithium cells or batteries contained in equipment that are transported by motor vehicle. So that would be by motor vehicle. This is specifically for lithium, but again, if you don't really know what it is, you're gonna have to sort it first. So that would be my recommendation, is you would need to sort it before it goes into transportation.
Great, thank you, Dan.
Yeah.
And there's I don't think we've answered it yet, Jennifer or Sarah, if you know in the Q&A. Can you see the Q&A, Dan, when you're presenting? Maybe
I can see the questions, but I can't see everyone else's answers until I go to.
Oh, yeah.
Jennifer, I think you just took away the question Amanda was maybe going to ask. Chris had a question about in 173, 185.2, the packaging exceptions mentions packaging within a 1.2 meter drop test. Does packaging other than UN/DOT packaging meet this? So
you wouldn't need to do a drop test if you're going under the non-DOT exception. So what was that reference again? Make sure that I'm not talking out of class here.
173.185.2.
A2.
just says parentheses two.
Okay.
Otherwise, maybe I can give your email to Chris to
Yeah,
follow up with
Yeah, just
specifically.
follow up with me on that one. Just send me an email. It's daniel.richards@dot.gov. I can put it in the chat here in a minute, when I'm done, presenting. So unfortunately, there's never a simple answer when we talk about regulations. So we kind of need all the information in order to give you an accurate and an intelligent answer. So I'm sorry if like some of the questions seem kind of evasive. It's not my intention to be evasive. It's just there's only so much I can answer based on, you know, the amount of circumstance and behind it and context. So was there any other questions?
I think we're good from the Q&A.
Yeah, I think that's
No.
good. I think Chris
Okay.
can follow up with you specifically. So I think that's it for Dan. I think there are one or two others for the other presenters once Dan's done.
Oh yeah, and it's 2:25, so I don't know if there's a, I know there's not a good break off point, Dan, I totally get it.
Okay.
But if there's any last thing you wanted to mention, you think?
I'm just saying hazard communications a big thing. I see a lot when I go to facilities. I don't do it that much anymore because I'm an outreach person, but recently I have had the privilege to walk through some facilities and see what's going on. And some of the issues that I see regularly is not understanding those exceptions for recycling and DDR and the difference therein. So, I mean, a lot of people, they think that it's all DDR if they're going to recycle it. That's not true. You're really handcuffing yourself a lot of times because you can get away with just having a strong outer package with recycle batteries. Say if you're just doing a Gaylord or something like that, a large non-spec package, if you're shipping under recycling for the purpose of recycling and under that exception. And then, you know, if you're trying to do that DDR and assuming, you know, because it's an end-of-life battery that it's all bad and I'm going to do the best thing, that's true. It might be the safest package if you're using something with cell block around it, but then you're really limiting your capabilities and you're having to use tons more packaging, costing you a lot more money, where if just by understanding the abilities you have under the other exceptions, that might increase your footprint or like your ability to ship more under that exception for that purpose. So that's just what I wanted to end with.
Thank you. And there is one, I think on this, please explain again and provide reference for exemptions for recycling.
So that's going to be for recycling specifically of lithium batteries. That's going to be 173, 185. I don't have them all memorized, so I have to use a cheat sheet. I have to actually look them up. That is going to be after C, I believe it's D. So that's for disposal or recycling. That's going to be under D, 173, 185D. And if you're shipping under damaged or defective or recycle, again, something that's bulging or obviously it has a potential for a thermal runaway, you'd be going under F. And that gets very specific for your packaging and your quantity and amount of cushioning material and cell block, things like that. So
thank you. All right, I was going to ask Jennifer, can you put up, I don't know if it's too much of pain, don't worry about it, but I was going to end, I have a couple questions here, but with the slide that shows the upcoming ones, but I'll say them at the
I
end
can.
here.
Oh.
So thank you, Dan. And I think for Neil and Eric, what trainings or resources are available for smaller recyclers or refurbishers that might not have staff to develop their own program? So everyone touched on training a little bit. But.
I guess this is Eric. I would I would have them reach out to their potential, whoever they're using maybe as a downstream vendor, to help them with what their expectations are for either handling, processing, or shipping the batteries. As we do help our customers with collateral that they can use to train their employees for the way we want to see our material come to us, and that helps us streamline our processes and also helps them, which in turn saves them cost.
I was going to mention that, Eric, even though you might be able to use a different container, your haz waste contractor might dictate exactly what they expect as well. And it might be geared more towards safety and include more requirements than DOT has.
I'll just mention too, I don't see a way to put a link, but EPA hosted a webinar in April of 2021 with folks from DOT talking through the shipping requirements. So I think that information is still good. Dan could correct me if I'm wrong, but if you just do a search basically for EPA webinar battery shipping, that came up in Google pretty quickly for me.
Yeah, that's correct. It's a good resource. That publication that was, or that presentation that was done by Neil Suchek and Jordan Rivera, I believe is the one you're talking about. It's about a little over an hour, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it walks through a lot of the requirements, but they did a nice job kind of condensing it in a few. If it helps you to hear it instead of just reading it in the guide, I think that might be one for that portion of it. There's obviously more to battery safety than that.
Yeah, that has a lot of good information in it. Unfortunately, for the purpose of this meeting, I wasn't going to be able to go through all that in detail. But I highly recommend listening to Neil and Jordan give that presentation, because it's a lot of great information. They have a lot of experience in the lithium battery stuff, and been ahead of a lot of the lithium battery campaigns that we've had so far at DOT. So.
You. And the last question, how can recyclers find responsible downstreams for batteries? Maybe Neil or Eric, potentially, or Emily?
I can, oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
I
Sure,
guess
I think that
I will
there-
need to defer that. I mean, we have a pretty elaborate compliance team that handles all of our downstream vendor vetting and, you know, matching them up with the certifications that we hold. So our compliance team, if a company would want to work with a company like Dynamic, we can provide a flow of where our material can go based off of the material that a particular company might send to us. But all that work is done by our compliance team.
Yeah, and this is Emily from Green Eye. I'm just going to chime in a little bit. This is what I do for the majority of the Green Eye work. And what I would say to cue in on it is find out who's processing the material. If you're looking for a downstream vendor, you want to ask where the batteries are going to be processed. And you want to pay attention to how many different vendors those batteries will pass through before it gets to the processor. So if I were you, as Eric was saying, like they have a big compliance team, they're looking for R2 or E-Stewards or ISO certs. You want to look to make sure that the company can handle on the compliance side, the health and safety, the environmental to handle the batteries. But you also want to make sure that you can obtain bill of ladings until the processing site, right? So the batteries could process through 3 different vendors or 4 different vendors before it actually gets to the battery processor. So you want to collect all of that information so that you know exactly which processing facility will be processing those specific types of batteries, and then confirm, as Eric's saying, on the compliance side and the tracking throughput before you do any shipments out of these batteries. You can check on the E-Stewards website and the Siri R2 website for recyclers in your area and for battery processors as well.
If you're bidding out a contract for this work, you should ask for the things that Green Eye just talked about. And we have a requirement with our contracts that they provide a flow chart They provide audit forms and also a list of facilities. And so we attack it 3 different ways because that's how many ways you have to go at it to get all of the vendors. And you might see yourself, well, here on the flow chart, there's no company listed, but they say that, you know, the XYZ company takes their batteries. Where's the audit form? Where's everything? So, and a lot of companies are required by those standard organization to do their own due diligence. So it's much easier to get this information than it was 20 years ago. I can tell you that. So, but everybody should do their downstream due diligence. Check on the company, call the state that regulates them. Of course, if it's a recycler, there's not a lot of regulation, but all the kind of basic things you do just to feel good about it.
Thank you. All
I've
right.
noticed too, I just want to say this, in previous contracts, there's always been like 1 or 2 or 3 battery recyclers. In the latest contracts, people are proposing like 15 of them because there's more batteries, more markets, and people are basically sending them to the place where they'll get the most value for them, which is, you know, what anybody would do. But that gets tough then when they start throwing 15 of them at you, which is probably what you can expect these days. Pick the best ones.
All right. Well, I think we'll wrap up. Thank you, Jennifer and Sarah, for helping me with the Q&A. Appreciate that.
You're
And
welcome.
thank you to all of our speakers. It was great. I appreciate your time prepping for this, your time today, and all of your knowledge. You did a great job. So with that, take a look at January 24th. I'll be on that one too for EV batteries, and then February 28th for extended producer responsibility.
Oops.
So, oh yeah.
Time I touch my clicker.
So,
Yes, please. Thank you all for joining us, the speakers, as well as the people who are just thirsting for more battery information. I saw Megan on there. I know they did a great 2.5 hour webinar. I think that you can find somewhere on Washington's website. Maybe I'll try to post that too. I thought that one was very helpful as well. You end up getting a little repeat on some of the safety and DOT stuff, but it's difficult to understand. So covering it a couple different ways, I think is helpful for people. So thank you. And we'll get this posted on our website probably within a week. And the other 3 are up there now. So, or the other 2, sorry. Thanks everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.